And I was literally walking down my hallway, which is where my office is. And I said out loud to nobody except for myself and my dog, this is my last corporate job.
Welcome to the Confident Podcast. I am Lisa Tarkington, your guide to mastering confidence and leadership. As a business and life coach, keynote speaker, and the driving force behind LEAD, I am here to help you break free from self-doubt, silence the imposter syndrome, and step into your power as the person you're meant to be. If you press play today, it's because you're ready for something bigger. Each week, I'll bring you real, raw conversations and actionable insights that will empower you to redefine your leadership, reclaim your confidence, and transform into the unstoppable force you've always known that you could be. This isn't just another podcast. It's a journey we're on together. So buckle up and let's dive into this transformation. Your next level awaits. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Confident Podcast. I am your host, Lisa Tarkington, and I am really excited about this conversation today. We are going to be talking about the 10-letter word that changed my life. Drum roll. It's a great one. I'm not going to give it all away. Okay, maybe I will at the end of this intro. But I am really excited about it because I'm not going to be talking about it alone. I think it's really important that we hear different people's perspectives. I love also just learning from different people. So we have an individual coming on, Jenny, who is, I just adore her. She has a podcast. She's a TedX speaker. She's an author and just such a phenomenal individual. And so what she's going to be talking about is her book, You Are My Favorite, how she started to choose herself, and how when she was going through identity changes, how confidence, keyword, that's the 10-letter word that changed her life as well as changed my life. And we're going to be diving into that because I think it's so important that we continue on this journey. I think the other cool thing about both of our experiences is when I was taking leaps, I was scared. When she took the leaps, she trusted herself. And so I think that that's really cool to hear different people's perspectives and also learn from each other. So we're going to really dive into that. And I think the other thing that I remind all of you is when you're listening to our podcast and when you're thinking about your own journey, I want you to know that I am here as a resource. I think I start every podcast off saying that because I love when anybody listening actually takes advantage of that. They reach out via DMs on social media. They email me. They bring me in to do some workshops for their company, or they hire me for coaching. Or honestly, the coolest thing is when they're using our Lead Within platform with the code that is in the show notes, because I gave a percentage off for that because I so believe that these are the tools that we need to have in our toolbox and also be using to be the best versions of ourselves. And every tool that I teach, I use. And so as you see me grow, I'm also always utilizing the tools that are being taught. So really, really excited to be having Ginny on. She's a woman, again, like I said, she has 2 decades of leadership experience in the corporate world. She's a TEDx speaker. She's a #1 bestselling author. And she also has a podcast, Drinking with Jen podcast, and she is a life coach. So as you can probably tell, we have a lot of things in common. And so without further ado, let's get into it. Ginny, welcome to the Confident Podcast. We are so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I can't wait.
It's going to be great. And, you know, one of the things I ask basically every guest that comes on is share a little bit about yourself and also how you got to where you are today.
Okay. So I'm going to take this in a little bit different path because I feel like what people always start with is what they do for work, right? They say, well, tell us a little bit about yourself. And they're like, I'm a this, I'm a that. And I just don't think that's what defines us. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of like weird things about myself, or maybe just like the fun facts.
Cool.
So
Perfect. Let's do it.
I love to travel. I'm a huge traveler. I love experiences. So one of my core values is experiences over things. I love Wheel of Fortune. If you're looking at me and you're like, wait, you can't love Wheel of Fortune. You're not at least 50 years old. Avid Wheel of Fortune watcher. Love doing puzzles. I'm like an old lady at heart. So that's what I love to do in my free time. But I last year, speaking of work, I exited corporate America. I had over 20 years of experience in corporate leadership roles, training, education, all kinds of stuff in medical aesthetics. People always ask, they're like, well, what part of corporate? Medical aesthetics. So think medical skincare, injectables. That's like what I did for over 2 decades or almost 2 decades just in that space. And my journey really changed because of an experience that happened in my life. And I know we're going to get to that. But now I'm a keynote speaker. That's first and foremost what I do. I love inspiring and empowering people and connecting with them from stage. I have my own podcast. So we've got that in common, the speaking and the podcasting. It's called Drinking with Gin. I'm an author. I have 2 books and I'm also a life coach. So that was like a big identity change for me, making that shift and going out on my own.
Yeah. So let's talk about the identity shift for a second, if you don't mind. So I feel like in my life, I've already had many changes with those things. And so when you made the shift from corporate to a whole new career, what was that like for you? And what was that like for your confidence?
So I don't know how woo-woo you get, but
Girl,
I can
do
be
what you gotta do.
a little, I can be a little woo-woo sometimes. So I had this very clear moment, and I think it was in July of 2021.
Okay.
And I was literally walking down my hallway, which is where my office is. And I said out loud to nobody except for myself and my dog, this is my last corporate job.
Mm.
It was just like this intuitive download that happened. And 3 weeks later, or less than 3 weeks later, I ended up meeting with this guide who told me, well, she had actually told me previously that she saw my career going in a different direction, that she saw me speaking on stages all over the world. And so that was kind of wild. And I hadn't even published my first book. But then I met with her again in August of 2021. And at that time, she said, there's something that you have been working on that you keep stopping and putting away, and you keep circling back to it. You need to finish it to move your life forward, because your job in this world is to help people heal and share their stories. It was wild. I called my publisher the next week. We got started on my first book, You're My Favorite,
Awesome.
and put together a 6-month plan to get it out into the world.
Wow. Okay. So lots of moments. And I'm proud of you for listening.
Yeah.
Because it's really tough, right? Like, it's really hard when you're like, this is what I know. And now I'm making this shift. And so for your confidence and all of that, how did you continue to believe in that? Even when you hear it from someone else, right? It all comes back to internal. Self-confidence has the word self in front of it,
I think for so long I had a false perceived sense of confidence.
Okay.
And I was actually listening earlier today to your episode on how to personalize your confidence journey. And I loved that. And I was so excited for this conversation because I think that there's so much alignment in what we both kind of share and talk about, and also so much to learn from one another. And I kind of define confidence, and maybe it's like a unique, or maybe it's a kind of a definition that a lot of people share, is how much you genuinely love yourself. And in order to love yourself, you have to like yourself. And in order to like yourself, you have to know yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes with pure authenticity. And part of my journey and my story, and what we talk a lot about on my podcast, is overcoming narcissist abuse. So that was my story. And when you have a narcissistic parent or family members and you're surrounded by that, you get told who you should be, what you should do, how you should look, what you should wear, what job you should have, what car you should buy. And it gets really confusing. And for me, I think I finally in this journey of the after story of what happened after what I wrote in this book, was really that self-discovery piece and being authentic. And I think part of what also comes with that is shedding that need for external validation or caring what other people think. Because I would way rather have, look, there's always going to be people that don't like me or you. I mean, there's always going to be people that don't like
Yeah,
us.
totally.
And there's always going to be people that we don't prefer.
True.
But I would way rather have people not like me for me than for a version that I was pretending to be.
Yeah. And I think when you say that, tell me how you got there. Because I think so many times we get there and it's very easy for us to say, okay, I'm here. I finally don't believe I finally am letting go of those things. But there's a lot of people that still struggle with that. I mean, I still have my days. I'm like, I had a presentation earlier. I literally was laughing with someone. I go, I hope they like me. And it's because my message was so important that I just wanted them to relate. Right. And so how did you get to where that is where you now are with that?
Well, and I love what you said in what you just stated is you made the shift of like, I hope they like me to realizing I hope they like my message. I hope that my message makes an impact. And like, that's such a simple shift. But for me, it was a lot of, it's kind of how I built my coaching model. It's called Gin Path. I like to keep things easy. So GIN. And the first step is gathering. That is where you start to just gain information about your own situation, whatever it is you went through or you're going through. And yes, that for me meant gathering information and insight about the people that were around me. But it's always that important step of turning the lens inward to go, okay, what are my coping mechanisms and what are the default behaviors that I've developed because of this, and taking a hard look at that, because the only thing I like to say, you can't change the people around you, but you can change the people around you.
Yeah.
And that was one of the big shifts that I had to make and realize that I was okay with that. And honestly, it's been one of the best decisions of my life, but it's that gathering information. So just like arming yourself with knowledge, because knowledge is power. And then the I's for intentions. And obviously there's a lot more that goes way more in depth into this, but the I for intentions, really being intentional and having affirmations about what you want your life to look like, how you want to design things, especially if you're making a big pivot, whether it's a career change or a divorce or, changing your people that you hang around with, or, it could any one of those things. And then the N is for nurture. Really, I incorporated meditation into my life-changing. Really sitting with yourself, doing things to care for yourself mentally, physically, emotionally. What am I missing spiritually, whatever that looks like for you. So it was really going on this journey and then looking back and going, okay, here's all the things that I did that worked for me. And you actually talked about a toolbox in that episode this morning. And I was like, oh, that's so funny. Cause like I always say my coaching, or because it's all put together in my second book, which is a guided journal. I always say it's a guide. It's not prescriptive, but it's a guide so that you can pick and choose what works best for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that you laid that out, because I think one of the things like that is really hard for people to do is the work on ourselves, right? Like I'm really good. Like who isn't going to be like, they got to do this. They should change this. Right. And it's really being like, point those fingers back at you, at that person, and be like, where do I need to grow in my confidence? Where do I need to grow in these different areas? How am I people pleasing so much? I recently did a workshop and we did how to overcome limiting beliefs, and 75% of the people in that classroom are people pleasers. And it was like, okay, like we got some people pleasing that we got to figure out. But I think back to your point that you made earlier of it's what we've also been taught. Right. And it's like changing that mindset doesn't happen overnight. So how would you say, how many years did it take you to reframe some of those mindsets?
Oh my gosh, I'm still doing it. And I think that's the beautiful part. If you decide to go on like a personal growth journey, self-improvement, like just know that it's never done, right? Like it's like diet and exercise doesn't work, but choosing a healthy lifestyle does, right? It's like you're making a choice to constantly be doing this. So like, trust me, I can tell when my meditation practice slips because I get road rage. I'm like, what is that guy doing over there? Like that is how it shows up for me. But you continuously have to be, like flex those muscles of self-awareness, of changing the negative self-talk. And going back to what you said about the people pleasing and perfectionism are two very common behaviors developed by people that have endured narcissist abuse. Because you're always trying to please the narcissist around you because they're never happy, right? Like they don't know how to love. And so you're constantly going, well, maybe if I do this, or maybe if I do this perfect, or I always have to make sure that they're happy so that they don't have an adult temper tantrum, or, maybe if I do this, then they'll love me, right? And I used to think perfectionism was a good thing. And I'm so glad I let that go. So I've personally been on this journey to go back and actually answer your question for almost 6 years. But again, it's a journey. It's a continuous thing that I'll, continue to embark on for the rest of my life.
Yeah. And I think what you said earlier, even too, like your guide and like how like you look at, having the tools, like the toolbox that I teach, it's never ending, but it's once you start to find the rhythm, you have a lot more self-awareness of, not doing these things, or how you start to react. And I think that that's the beautiful thing. I sometimes joke like, I wish I didn't have any self-awareness today because I just like want to let it all out. But at the same time, I think the cool thing is like, no, this is the journey that I really wanted, right? I like being able to know when my emotions are showing up or when I'm not doing the work. And it's really just calling yourself out as well and making those changes. And you shared earlier, you wrote a book. You wrote 2. And so the one of you are my favorite. So as you wrote that, take us through the journey of your confidence with that, or even like how you like had your well-being through that as well. Cause I think that like you've never written a book before at that time, you're learning all of those pieces. And at the same time, you're probably learning a lot about yourself too.
Yeah, I think the most interesting part about You're My Favorite is I started writing it like pretty close after the end of this relationship.
Okay.
And I think at that time I was still angry. I was upset. I had a lot of just a lot of hurt and anger. And so I started writing it, and then I ended up putting the book down for goodness, 2.5 years. So I started writing for about 6 months. I put it away for almost like on the proverbial shelf for almost 2.5 years. I dabbled a little bit and thought, maybe I should do it. But when I met with Barb, my guide, then when I picked it back up, as I got through, it's the story shifted and changed so much because I had changed so much. I had made, and I talk about this in my TedX talk, I had made this big transition. I think this comes along with that, like shedding this false sense of confidence. I used to have like this false protective sense of armor and this toughness about me. But I shed that and became so much more strong, where you kind of like embrace the things that happen. And that's kind of what makes us beautiful and unique and whole and completely us. And so that was what I saw when I got towards the end and we were kind of getting towards the end of the writing process. I would look back at some of the things that I had written 2.5 years prior, and I was like, ooh, she was angry, and that's okay. But that also wasn't where I was. And so I think that there's something really important to be said about timing and giving yourself that opportunity to be where you're supposed to be. Because, putting a book out, like it's out there in the world forever, right? Like there's no take backs.
Yeah.
So it's really important. I'm so glad that I had that time. So that was like a really big reflective moment of like how I evolved and what I learned about myself through that process.
I also think what came up when you were talking about that is like, sometimes we rush to get things done because we're like, this is my dream. I'm going to like push through it. Like I only have so much time. And what you did is like, you gave yourself that break because you wanted it to be what it was meant to be. Right. And how many times, I'll put my hand up. How many times have I just put something out there because I'm like, this is in my mind. Let's just get it out there and see. But then you're not as proud, right? Or you haven't thought through because you've changed as you've grown in your personal growth.
Yeah, and I also think that's okay because it gives you the opportunity to look at that and go, "Oh, I learned from this and this is maybe how I would do it differently now." Which I think we're both saying the same thing,
Yeah.
but it depends on the scale or the gravity or, I guess how much you want to put into said project. I was still working in my corporate job when this book even came out.
Wow.
So it was, I didn't have a lot of time to work on it. It was, I would spend my flights or, weekends and evenings, working on this as sort of a passion project. I had no idea at that time, even though I had listened to my intuition in July of 2021, where I was like, this is my last corporate job. I didn't really know how that was all going to unfold.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy how like you hear something and you're like, yeah. This is amazing. I have no idea what's going to happen with this. And then here you are in 2024, just like living, honestly, it sounds like a different life than what you've had in the past. And like you brought up like the identity thing, and it sounds like you've just had a lot of evolutions and changes. Where do you feel in your chapter now you're following those things? I mean, scary, I would assume, to make that leap, and tell me if you feel differently. But when I took my leap, I was scared. And so like walk us through that a little bit too, because I think that that's also pretty amazing to think about, is like you wrote a book in the midst of change and then you've eventually took that leap.
So what's interesting is I don't know that the word scared really resonates with me. And I don't know why. Maybe I should have been scared. People might be like, "Ginny,
No,
you
that's
should have
great
been
for you.
scared."
Yeah.
But I knew that this is what I needed to do. And I knew that this would work. And trust me, like one of my old colleagues just told me like a month ago, she's like, that there's people out there saying that you're never gonna be successful at this. And I'm like, oh, that's just one more reason for me to succeed. Right. Like I don't like that external noise doesn't bother me. I think it was Coco Graf, the famous tennis player. I
Yeah.
think she won the US Open or something. And at the end, or like during her speech, she was like, people that, like my haters, all they do is give me more fuel and fire. And to make me want to succeed even more. So it's like kind of shutting out that noise. And when you have the confidence and that self assuredness, and when you are doing what you're supposed to be doing, it doesn't really feel like work. And I have shifted and changed. Like my lifestyle is so much better. I, like they say, slow mornings are, like that's the real rich. Being able to not that having that rat race of, and not to say that like, look, everybody shouldn't leave corporate. We need people in corporate, but if it is your path and like this is your journey, like it was for me, like it was for you, then it's once you do it, it's not as scary as you think. It's almost like that's a false belief that we have been told, that we have had instilled in us. And I've had a couple of friends that I worked with in that industry that I think they thought I was a little crazy, and now they've left corporate to go out on their own and do consulting. And they're like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I want to go back and work for the man. And I was like, I know, once you get that little sweet taste of freedom, it's pretty delicious, isn't it? So I think people just like, again, going back to customizing what it means for you could be something really different.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's funny because I did the corporate thing and now I'm out on my own, and it's still, I would say, some of the things that I still dealt with then, I still deal with now, and I know that's not the case for you, but I think that everybody, like, it's different hard for me, right? It's a different choose my hard. And so I remind myself that sometimes is like, I can go back if I want to. I can keep doing what I want to now. And I think sometimes we sit in this position where it's like, I'm stuck. I felt stuck for a while. Like, and there are moments still where I'm just like, okay, like what's next for me? And it's all about like, back to the point that you made earlier about like, I need to sit with this for a while. I need to think on this. I don't have to make big decisions right now. And I think that's important for people to understand too. Like, you are also sharing, like, you had this feeling in 2021. It didn't just happen overnight, right? Like, it's a process, and processes are okay. I mean, my team would probably love if I said processes are a great thing all the time, right? And it's just like that mindset work that has to happen through all of this. And, back to like, what's the 10-letter word that changed our lives? It's confidence, right? And it's confidence in ourselves. And, we have, I'd say, like, when we think of the definition, you shared your definition of it is like really loving yourself. And so when you think of that and you think of how that changed your life, like, if you could describe that in one way, what does that look like for you?
So really, I think it's like just being true to who I am, right? Like for me, it was that need to shut out the external noise. I had to kind of remove some of the narcissists from my life that wanted to control me, that wanted to, make me think that that I needed to be a certain way. And it's like, honestly, the energy that you have to exert is also so much less because you're just being you. And nobody else gets to be you. And like, I just can't encourage people enough. I mean, I spoke to this group of women at the University of Minnesota last fall, and I never thought like young women would be my target demographic. It went so well. I had like a handful of their mothers reach out and connect with me on social media going, you just spoke to my daughter. It made such a big impact. So part of me is like always putting that in perspective. Like, what would I tell younger me? Or like, what do I wish I knew then?
Yeah. And so you would say being your authentic self. And so if you had to describe who you were in 3 words and who you are today in 3 words, what's the difference being your authentic self now?
Oh my gosh. That's really hard. 3 words in 3 words. Lisa, you're killing me. Okay,
it can be a sentence. It's fine. Yeah,
no,
go ahead. Okay.
No.
What's the past? Tell me that one first.
You're my favorite.
You're my favorite. Okay. And what is it now?
I'm my favorite.
Ooh.
That is the names of my 2 books. But that is legitimately so accurate. Like you put me on the spot and I had to really think about it. But that is the truth. You're my favorite. I was focused on everybody else around me. I'm my favorite. It's shifting that focus to that internal authenticity and being really who you truly are.
That is so beautiful. And I'm glad that you shared that. I got goosebumps when you did, because, a lot of times it's really hard to pick yourself, especially people that work in the service world. Right? Like we have these hearts, I do a lot of the coaching piece. And I always say that when people have issues with confrontation and things like that, it's because they care so much that it's actually like they're so nervous to have those conversations because they care so much. And I always have to remind them, like, choose yourself in this moment of like, how would you want someone to come to you about these things? You would rather them talk to you than avoid these situations. And so we have to talk to ourselves as well. And so I love that. And it sounds like that's the advice that I was going to ask you. What would you tell your younger self? That was actually going to be my next question. But it sounds like that would be being your authentic self and choosing who you want to be.
Yeah. Be your own damn favorite.
I love that. And I think too, like tool wise, I love to give people tools. It's like, take a minute, write down, what do you love about yourself? What are the things that you enjoy in your own company? And that's an aha right there. So I've had a lot of people say, like, I've never been by myself. I don't know how to be by myself. And I shared on the last podcast or a couple of podcasts ago that some of the best and worst decisions I've ever made, the best one was spending time alone. And that's scary for people because when you've been around people and always making everybody else happy, it's like, oh, I have to like myself. I have to like spending my time. And honestly, there are days where I'm like, no one talk to me. I just want to be by me today, right?
Yes. I love alone time. I actually did my first, so I've traveled a ton throughout my career and for fun too. But last December, I did my first solo vacation. And so if being like spending a chunk of time alone by yourself sounds a little intimidating, scale it down. If a solo vacation sounds like too much, do a weekend. If a weekend sounds like too much, go out to dinner by yourself or take yourself out to lunch or breakfast. That was something that I did a lot during the pandemic. I would go, like once we were able to go out in public again, I would go out to lunch by myself or take myself out for breakfast or coffee and, work from a different location. Sometimes just a change of scenery. Even if you're like, well, it seems weird to like sit at home by myself or, try something and, try multiple different things until you find what works.
I love that. And as you were saying that, I think one thing that came to mind is, we long for relationships with people and that connection. And so we should also long for that relationship with ourselves, right? And that connection, because it's so beautiful when you start to find all these like cool things about yourself. And I remember in my 20s, like people are like, your 30s are going to be the best. And then I hear people are like, my 40s are the best, right? Like everybody, I think what people are really truly saying is they're finding who they are through this process. And some people just move faster than others, so kind of like to wrap up today, what would you leave the audience with?
Well, I think it's a lot of what you were just saying. It's, the older we get, like I can say 40s were better than 30s, 30s were better than 20s. And that's okay, because your priorities shift. But man, if I would have prioritized, myself and peace of mind and, being present, actually enjoying what you're doing. Because you know what? If you have 200 work emails that are going to come through while you're on vacation, they're still going to be there when you get back. Like being fully present in everything that you do, because otherwise you're missing out on your life.
Yeah, I love that. Be present. That's something that I could probably definitely take that advice on as well, right? So I love that. And so how can our audience find you today if they want to continue to connect with you?
Okay, well, like I said, I keep things easy. Everything is my name, Ginny Priem. So my website is ginnypriem.com, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all just my name. Like just keeping it simple.
Love that. Love that. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on. I loved our conversation. I loved relating. I also love learning. So I think that that's the other thing too, is while I'm in this space, while confidence is like my jam, it sounds like the one thing that I can continue to grow on is like being present, understanding like while I'm still a service provider, it's choosing to take care of myself too. And I think sometimes we just need those reminders, even in the midst of everything that we've learned. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's podcast. I know I already took away some things in my notes where it's like, yes, I needed that reminder. Yep, I needed that reminder, or just honestly a little bit of validation that you're also on the right track. I also think it's really cool when we can look internally of all the things and shifts that we need to make ourselves versus looking at all the external people to really make us happy. And so that's really what I hope you guys all took from today, is to become your favorite. And I love that. I love that saying. And it was just such a great conversation. So if this resonated with you, if this is something that you really took away from today, I'd love to hear. So make sure that you're subscribing to our YouTube channel, that you are, sharing on the ratings, any information that you've taken away, and also always DM me on Instagram, Lisa Tarkington Official. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to really support you on your journey. So as I always say, continue to spread love and kindness to everybody that you meet, and have a great day. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Confident Podcast. If today's episode resonated with you, head over to leadconfidently.org for today's show notes along with discounts to our services. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, leave a review, and follow us on Instagram and YouTube at The Confident Podcast. Your feedback means the world to me, and it helps more people discover the show. And hey, if you're feeling inspired to dive deeper, let's connect. You can find me on Instagram at Lisa Tarkington Official. Drop me a message and let's explore how I can support your journey to confidence and leadership. Remember, you have the power to choose confidence every single day. Keep showing up, keep striving, and keep believing in your potential. I'm cheering you on, and I'll see you next time.